This is the state of the nation. Ibifa Rwanda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Sally. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. Welcome to the African Alumni Association. My name is Henry Sally, and this is the state of the nation. Before we start, we wish to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto African Alumni Association operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land for the Huron, Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is home to many indigenous people from across the Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. Many people always wonder why I start with the land acknowledgement. Well, it's because I am an immigrant on the land on which I operate here in Toronto, Canada, and therefore I pay due respect to the people who have accepted me as a visitor, but also as a citizen on their land. So I appreciate them. Again, welcome to the African Alumni Association. My name is Henry Sally, and this is the state of the nation. Today, we are interrogating the Muhoozi man, not the project, but the man. There are two concepts. There is the concept of the Muhoozi project. Then there is one of the Muhoozi, the man. So we are trying to interrogate who is Muhoozi the man. You know very well, he just celebrated his 48th birthday, and he made sure that it becomes a national issue, even though many people on the ground are struggling with paying for groceries or essentials, basic needs. This young man of 48 decided to celebrate his birthday and make it a national issue. Many elites in Uganda have named him the Impostor Diplomat for one reason. He pulled off a diplomatic engagement that was successful, that led to the reopening of the Katuna border between Rwanda and Uganda. That is the reason why some people are calling him an impostor diplomat. Is he a diplomat? We are going to find out. Who is he? Where was he born? Is he eligible to run for presidency? And can he sustain the project, the so-called Muhoozi project? Do you think their strategies will work? This morning or today, he called his dad, as well as the president of Rwanda, two of the most strategic leaders in East and Central Africa. Is it true? We are about to find out. In the studio with me today, two very important colleagues. Marion Chilabo, most of you know who she is. She'll be introducing herself shortly. And Maurice Ojili. Honorable Lutamaguzi is supposed to be with us, but she is still struggling with the internet, still struggling to log on. If he does end up logging on, we shall be delighted to have him, because I think he has been one of the fiercest critic of the Museveni government, as well as the so-called Muhoozi project. He has embarked on awakening Ugandans, those who are still asleep. I think it's the same task that we are taking on here at the State of the Nation, to awaken Ugandans regarding the political issues of their country, understanding very well that we cannot resolve the economic, the social, and the cultural issues if we fail to solve the political question, the leadership question, the transition question. Therefore, before we start, I want to invite my colleagues to introduce themselves, starting with the lady in the house, Marion. Welcome to the State of the Nation.
Thank you so much, Henry. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to be here. Can you hear me before I proceed? My network is on and off.
I know you do hear you, yes.
So yes, once again, my name is Marion Chirabo. I'm the CEO of Next Gen Women Initiative, which is an organization that is focused on increasing women's participation in political spaces, especially at institutional level. And I'm glad to be here. I hope we can dive into the matters of the day and perhaps give Ugandans a perspective of what is going on and how we could be part of the change that we want to see. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Marion. Nice to see you once again. Mr. Ojiri Morris Gave. Unmute yourself and introduce yourself. We haven't seen you in a while. It's been a while that you have been here. Unmute yourself and introduce yourself once again.
Thanks a lot, Ndugu Sari, for hosting me on this show. I'm called Morris Ogiri, a native of Apache district, or they call it United States of Apache. I've been there for some time, you know that very well. We work together in some. I've been at the political scene for some time. You know that very well. Me and you, we've been working together for some time. So when things didn't work out somewhere, which you know very well, I went to sleep for some time. With the resurgence of the imposter, I'm like, no, it can't just go like that. Let me come back to the scene again and see how to unveil him properly. Otherwise, thanks a lot for hosting me again on this show today.
Thank you so much again for joining the State of the Nation. And we are excited to know more about this guy, the Impostor Diplomat, also known as Muhoozi Kainerugaba. We know that it's very important that we start from the beginning, right? But before we go to the beginning, we know very well that most recently, one of his biggest achievements, internationally at least, he was able to broker off a diplomatic deal between Rwanda and Uganda. And of course, we very well know, based on the information that is online, he calls the president of Rwanda his uncle, and of course, the president of Uganda is his dad. This morning, he posted that I consider President Kaguta Museveni and President Paul Kagame the best strategists that ever lived. When Team MK wins power in this country, which we will, our first act will be to increase the sports budget. So he's already putting himself into the fray to become the next president of Uganda, even though the documentation, most of the documentation indicates that he is not eligible to run for president of Uganda based on where he was born originally. And of course, if we are to go with the constitution of Uganda, he cannot run for president if he was not born in Uganda. Why don't we start with where he was born? Do we know where Mr. Muhoozi was born? Do we know who his real mother is? Because recently I was reading a book from the Minister of Education, who is also apparently General Muhoozi's stepmom, Janet Kataha Museveni. And she seems to be telling the nation, she seems to be telling Ugandans that she's the mother of Muhoozi Kainerugaba. Why don't we start with where he was born? Who is Muhoozi Kainerugaba? When was he born? Where was he born? May I start with you, Morris? Do you have any idea where Mr. Muhoozi was born? and who his mother is, because apparently, according to Wikipedia, even Wikipedia is not sure. It says it calls. I think Wikipedia says that the so-called mom is Janet Caterham 7, but it's not certain. It's not certain. It says allegedly. They call Janet Caterham 7 an alleged mom, which means it is something to look into and find out. What are your thoughts, Mr. Jerry?
I won't delve much into where he was born, but given the books I've been reading about him, right?
Yeah.
Because I may not be his biographer to know a lot, like deep details about him. I try to do research about him, but all I know, if you read the mother's book, mother authored some book. I think I read that book like 10 years ago now, 8 or 5 years ago. I don't remember or so. Even the mustard seed. Of course, the father documents that he was born around 1974 in Tanzania. Of course, given our constitution now, I don't think he's supposed to even be the president of Uganda. He shouldn't even be talking about it. Then some other rumor. Now this is a rumor, right? I don't have any proper knowledge about it. Says he was born in Tanzania, I think, to a lady called Hope Rwanda. I don't know. That's the mother.
Right.
I'm hearing that for some time though, but I don't have details about that. Like I told you, this one I shall leave it to his biographer. I may not know much about that. I won't delve much there. My center of focus, I want my center of focus to be around, because this issue called Muhoozi, the Muhoozi topic has been now in the political domain in Uganda for some time now. It's been on for some time. I got to know about him. I think his name came in the limelight around 1999, right? When I think he recruited these OBs from Kisubi and Budo. That was in Gasenyi. They went for training in Gasenyi and they said they called them LDUs. Then they were called LDUs. So I didn't pay much attention because I knew. And LDU, of course, the work of the LDUs then. Their work was to deal with petty thieves around the village and so on and so forth. So most Ugandans didn't pay this much attention, right? But his name again resurfaced around 2001. Okay, between 1999 and 2000, that's when I think he went to Sandhurst for a military course, right? Then he came back and married his wife in a very pompous wedding. Now, his name coming to the limelight, real limelight from then to date, it has never gone back, was in 2001. That was in his father's swearing-in ceremony in Kololo, when Gaddafi promoted a second lieutenant, right? He left Sanders as a second lieutenant. Gaddafi promoted him to a major. When Gaddafi promoted to a major, people made a lot of noise. How come? How could he just end up becoming a major? So his name has been there for some time. So from 2001 to 2000, maybe 13, he kept on rising steadily in ranks in the army. Kept on rising steadily in ranks. I think he was promoted every week, if I'm not mistaken. Every week he was being promoted. And he had the privilege of being taken to all the best military schools I think we have around the world. Where haven't you been, by the way? He's been to Fort Something military school in the US. He was in Sanders, of course, you know Sanders. It's one of the most prestigious military schools in the world. He was in South Africa. Many, I can't even name all of them. Many. Egypt, something like that.
Yeah.
So then we didn't also pay much attention. We just maybe want to be a soul like the father. His real name, stopping at that, his real name resurfaces now on the issue of political leadership around 2013, when General Sejusa wrote a letter to ISO to investigate the allegations of what everybody Uganda knows, because it's something in the open. That's a little I know about him.
That is the little you know about him. The mother you have mentioned, I think, has also appeared in a document that is going around the internet right now. Hope Raheru, originally born in Buraya, Fort Potro, Uganda. She was 23 when she gave birth to Muhoozi Kainerugaba. At the time, according to this document, Mr. Yoweri Tibuhaburwa Lutawasirwa Museveni were 30 years, and apparently was born in Intare, Rwanda. We need to figure out the authentication of this documentation, of course, to figure out what exactly is going on. But I wonder what Marion has. What are your thoughts, Marion?
Hello?
Because I think it's very important that before we interrogate the Muhoozi project, we understand the man behind the entire project. So who is the man? And
I
yes,
think
we
the
do hear
only
you.
I think the only thing you just that is material right now is whether or not he's Museveni's son. I think that is the major and only qualification right now at this moment. I don't think maybe until this regime goes, any of us will ever have the exact facts. Right now, he is protected by, of course, his father's machinery and the government, which is the government machinery. They can construct any story about him to fit their narrative, just like they have been doing with Museveni's age for all this time and his level of education, whether or not he has a degree. So it's the same thing. We will not be able to trace who his real mom is, where he was exactly born. I mean, right now they're saying he was born in Tanzania. Tomorrow they can wake up and say, actually, this man was born in Fort Port. Like, they can make up anything as long as it fits their narrative. The tools of propaganda, they create, they relatively influence our reality, and they have such power that they can also create their own reality right now as it stands. So whether or not he was born here, his mom is here, it doesn't matter. What matters is that, is he the son? Is he the person who they can entrust with their legacy? Is he the person who they can entrust on the throne and say that, okay, if he is there, we are protected. They Our political enemies will not come after us and confiscate all the wealth and all the lands and everything that we have achieved in the last 40 years, that we are relatively safe, that we can continue to influence the politics of Uganda and of the intercastrian region, because that is also important, because that source of wealth, as we have seen, most of it has been gotten through these wars that they get. Kagame and Museveni have been as thick as thieves when it comes to exploiting their neighbors and creating wars in countries like Congo and South Sudan and the rest, looking for ways to sustain their wealth and exploit. So it shouldn't surprise anyone if Kagame would be interested in continuing that same legacy with someone who is seen as Museveni's successor, someone who is even relatively young, giving him the upper hand. You get, he can easily influence a one Muhoozi who perhaps is not even a politician, manipulate him however he wants, then maybe I would say that a one Ruto, if they were to come into power or anything. So he's the best ally, to continue whatever illicit transactions they have been having for that is Muhoozi to continue the Museveni legacy, yes or no? And that, then we can create for him a mom, we can create for him a citizenship, we can create for him everything.
It's very interesting. It is very interesting that you're talking about allies right now, and you're saying that it could be the best ally right now for them to protect their wealth, their and everything they have done so far, protect them from the law, protect the wealth they have accumulated, regardless of how much of mismanagement that has gone through the country, and they have used to accumulate that wealth. And it's very interesting that we are talking about this now. How did we get here? How did we let this guy accumulate all this clout? Did we ignore him so much that he has gotten here without our knowledge? Like, what happened when General Sejusa revealed the project, the Muhoozi project? Why did we interrogate this guy then and put him in his place before he could get to where he is right now? And what must we do to ensure that this plunder does not continue, the plunder that has gone on in Uganda, that it does not continue with another generation of another generation of people born outside of Uganda? Maurice, you are muted.
See, you're saying, what did we do
Why did it take us so long
to understand this, to know all
Why-
this?
Did we ignore this guy? Did we think? Did we think that he could get to the proportions that he is at right now? Because it seems that we ignored him so much that we are now waking up when it's early. We are trying to cover ourselves in the morning at 6 a.m.
See, before I even answer that, it's a very good question though. But before I answer it, that's the reason why I wanted Lutamaguzi here, right? That's the reason why I really wanted him here. But still, I could pinpoint out something he mentioned recently, that he's writing a book, he's authoring a book that says Uganda is among the most sleeping nations in the world. It has a population that is sleepy. I think he's right in a way. Ugandans have been sleeping for a long, long time, right from the 70s, right? Uganda is like a testing ground for anything. Anyone can do anything in Uganda, it works. This didn't start only with Museveni's time, but it started from the 70s. There have been a lot of extrajudicial killings right from the 70s. And you find the government or state of the day, or the population of the day could do nothing about it. So Lutamaguzi talked of the Galatians coming to a country, the Galatians coming to a country as refugees or something like that. Then within a short time, they had planned the entire country naked. So we see that also happening in Uganda today. But it's unfortunate that he hasn't joined the show today. I don't even know why. But Uganda is a sleeping nation. I can tell you this. Even if you alert them about something, they won't pay much attention towards it. Yet they know it's wrong. For example, whatever has been happening in Uganda for the past 30 or 40 years or so, there have been a lot of evil done in Uganda. And Ugandans know it. They know it's wrong. For example, you can't rule out the fact that there have been election rigging. We all know this. He has been rigging his way out right from around 2001 or something like that. But Uganda do nothing about it. You do something wrong, people, you will disappear with people, arrest people, torture them, and the Ugandans see you've tortured somebody, you've arrested them. They will talk nothing about it. They will talk about it for a day or two or three. They can't sustain something. 2 or 3 or 4 days. After that, it goes back to normal. So going back to what's happening with Muhoozi now, it's not a big thing as such, given the prevalent situation in Uganda, how Ugandans behave. Ugandans will see something like I've told you, and they won't act. Not until it goes deep or it hurts them so deep. That's when maybe they'll wake up. Let me give a simple example here before we delve much into this. In the 1970s, you know what happened in the 70s from 1971 to 78, right?
Right.
There was a lot of extrajudicial killing by a means so-called state search bureau then. And Ugandans knew this. It went on for around 9 years, right? It only took the intervention of another foreign country, a sovereign state, to bring back Ugandans. What were Ugandans doing? Of course, there were some exiles who also came in, but it took the power of another president of a sovereign state to restore order in Kampala. And Ugandans knew this. Are you still surprised that a man like Amin came with his P4 papers and ruled Uganda for 8 years? Are you surprised today? It's very unfortunate that it's also happening in our time. That our generation, right?
Yeah.
That our generation has also allowed this to happen. I thought this was something that happened during our parents' generation. We wouldn't have allowed something like this. But it's very unfortunate that the generation of Sally, the Ogilis of today, are also allowing such a thing to happen, right? So Muhoozi coming in and the father kept on putting the limelight for some time. He kept on coming in for some time. Let me give an example. The man called Joseph Goebbels. Of course, that quote was used a lot by Hitler, but it was a quote by Goebbels. He said, if something is put, if a lie is told repeatedly, to some extent it becomes the truth, right?
Right.
The first time the issue of Muhoozi project came into the limelight, Uganda made a lot of noise, right? Because it was the first time they were hearing of it. But after some time, because it's very much in the public domain and it's being discussed a lot, what happened? It becomes normal. When it becomes normal, and they're not even paying much attention towards it. But before they know it, this man will be in State House. Before they know it, because as events are taking place now, as you see things unfolding, if we do not do something about it, our generation, our dad's generation, and our kids' generation will be ruined. You're talking of a man who is being fronted. He is now I think he has so far covered 70% of his dreams, if I'm not to be mistaken. 70%. The father so far now pushed 70%. Why do I say this? When the father came to power, of course, there was a hierarchy. Oppo should have taken off from the father, right?
Yeah.
There was the Kategayas, there was Mbabazis, there was who. We knew all this. Come to 2001. It's 2001, right? When
Dr. Besige apparently jumped to that show as well.
I was telling you, I was going to come on that. I was going to mention that. When they said if Kagu goes, if the father of the imposter goes, who comes in? Kategaya. When Kategaya goes, who comes in? Mbabazi. Then Besige. Then Mbabazi accused Besige of jumping the queue. So before you go even deep into that, what happened with the queue? Do you see any of their names in the queue again anymore? Now the queue has been zero to the first family, and Ugandans are quiet about it. Right. The queue has been zero to the first family. Okay, what happened to Kategaya? Died a very frustrated man. What happened to Mbabazi's queue? Fast rising. He was more or less a state within a state himself. What happened? Right? Yeah. What happened to Mbabazi? That today, it has now zero to the first family. How? Name the first kept on coming up. The first name that came in was for the first lady. I hear the wife cannot take over. You can imagine. They have now reduced us to a level of kingdomship, a dynasty. The wife's name came up for some time. It disappeared. Then the brother's name came in. Saleh's name came in. It also disappeared. Which other name came up again?
Rabogo.
Son-in-law. Rabogo. Yeah. Rabogo's name came up. Now, as I'm talking right now, all those names have gone out to oblivion. Now,
Rabogo's name is still around. It's just not being fronted yet.
Not much as we see this one now. Now, for this one, they are using all the state resources. They are using everything within their means to make sure he becomes president, which is very obvious. You don't need to be blind to see, right? You don't need to be blind to see that the young man, the so-called imposter, is being positioned to become the president of Uganda. It's something in the public. It's something in the public now. It's open, so it's between. It's a matter. We need to. If we don't wake up and put a cap on what's happening now and stop it, we are doomed. We are doomed.
We are doomed. That's a very, very, very tough statement to say. Marion, what do you think? Like when you hear Mr. Ojiri say everything that he's saying right now, and then you compound it with Muhoozi's recent tweet that I just read, that I think you have also seen somewhere, praising his dad and his uncle and assuring us that he is going to win, and then when he wins, the youth he's thinking about investing in sports. That's for him. That's the big issue right now for the youth. What are your thoughts when you see this? As a young leader who is also mentoring, encouraging more ladies to engage into politics.
Well, when I look at most of Muhoozi's posts, I think he's very delusional as a person and quite out of touch with his country. And I will just start from there. It has always been a common trend, whether it was Gaddafi, whether it was anyone else, that took Korea. Like, look at dictatorships all over. Since history, they have always wanted for their sons and daughters to succeed them. You get, he makes sure he gives the son or daughter all the resources and all the training, everything that they need. But as history has shown us, it is not easy for you to successfully hand over power, the presidency, especially in what we would call maybe a pseudo democracy, over to your son or your daughter. I mean, even in monarchies, even if we look at the history of monarchies, it was hard even in those days, leave alone these days of constitutional monarchies whereby no succession, just because that the seat doesn't hold the power it used to anymore. So no one is struggling for it anymore. But even in the past, with that power, with the power that came with the seat, people were always eager, fighting for it, watching. As soon as the ruler died, they were quick to jump and execute the kids immediately because they posed a threat. So it's not as easy. You see, the respect that, let me say, Museveni's political allies would have for him, and the kind of influence and the power he holds over them, and how he maneuvers and maybe manipulates and threatens and creates consensus about them. Museveni is his own person, and Muhoozi is a different other person. Whereas all these players in the political scene can be loyal to him being, let me say, the oldest. Even when he came to power, if you look at the cadres, he was much older than them. He was 42, and the people who were, next to him were like in their 20s and in their 30s.
Yeah, mainly
So the
23,
age
24,
creates
most of
a
them.
level of, first of all, imbalance, power imbalance, but also the fact that he was the mastermind of this whole thing. So you cannot transfer that level of respect.
Right.
Yes, you can.
We didn't hear that last statement. We didn't hear that the last statement that you made.
Henry,
Yeah.
can you hear me?
Barely.
Is it my network that is breaking? Like I hear you in beats. Can you hear
Yeah.
me?
Well, we are also hearing you in bits, so we are missing a huge chunk of the information you are sharing. She doesn't hear us. Okay. Yeah, so she left. She'll be joining us. She'll be joining us later. Your thoughts, your thoughts, Mr. Ojiri, based on what Marion has said.
Of course, she said it's very hard for. What did she say? Very hard for.
Museveni is his own person, right? And he said it's very hard for people to just bring in their sons to replace them, because even in the days of the colonies, it was hard. People fought to take on that kind of leadership. But what are your thoughts? Do you think that we have been played, and that Ugandans are just going to come up and accept the status quo? Because I have heard in some circles already, they have already started negotiating with Muhoozi regarding having a unitary government as opposed to just NRM occupied government. In that they want to ensure that even though they may not, the opposition may not have the opportunity to govern directly, there should be some sort of compensation in terms of giving opposition members ministerial positions to govern with the sitting government. So are we on the right track? Or are Ugandans already defeated? Should we just sit back and wait for the coronation of the the impostor diplomat?
First, I will say it won't succeed. That's one. Two, as Marcus Garvey said, a people without a history is like a tree without roots, right? Unless the first family has forgotten our history is very clear. The only lucky part they have on their side that they've been at the helm for like 40 years. That's just luck, right? But them thinking they can transfer power from them to their son, it won't succeed. It won't work. People have tried. In Africa, I think they only succeeded in one place. For Uhuru, you can't talk about it because it was from Uhuru to his father. From the father to him. No, it was different. So you can't say the one of Kenya succeeded. That was a different arrangement altogether. But in Africa, I think it only succeeded in Togo, right? And you saw what happened.
How about Cameroon?
In Gabon as well. Cameroon not yet. In Gabon. It succeeded in Gabon, but you saw what happened as well. But if you're giving such reference as well, you can't compare Gabon to Uganda. You can't compare, how do you call this? Gabon and where? What did you talk about?
It happened in Gabon and
it happened in Gabon. In Africa, it happened in Gabon. It happened where again? Of course, I'll remember it. It happened in Gabon under Omar Bongo. Of course, if you look at their history, I think it was from another president, then Bongo took over, then to the son. But if you look at our history, that's why you have to first know our history before you cite an example of Gabon. You have to know our history before you cite the example of maybe other countries. Now, Hussein Mubarak tried in Egypt. Did it succeed?
No.
Yes. Somebody tried it in the Saddam's tried. Did it succeed? Did it succeed? It didn't, of course, succeed. Where else again? I mean, there are endless examples. So, but our history is very clear. You know how the first government went. The second government came, you know how it went. The third one came, you know how it went. And you also know how the current president came to power. It was only him who should have broken that jinx of going to Kololo, maybe I don't know when, and handing over peacefully to another president. But the issue of him thinking he's going to hand over to his son, and the son will continue with the father's ideology. It won't work. That won't work. I can tell you that it won't succeed. Today is the 1st of May, Labor Day. If he ever succeeds, I'll never go back to my home in Apache. It won't succeed. Ugandans are going to fight it.
Ugandans are going to fight it, but how? That's the question. How are the Ugandans going to fight that thing? We also know that in Botswana, I think the founding father, or the son of a founding father, ended up becoming president of Botswana as well.
Let me correct you on that as well. But look at their history as well. Their history is very different. Here you're talking of Obote comes in. You're talking of 1966. You're talking of Amin coming in. How did Amin come in? Through the Holy Spirit? Amin had to, you know how Amin came into power. How did Museveni come in? He had to baptize himself into power as well, using what? Fire. So it happened in Botswana. That's true, because in Botswana there's a serious and straight multi-party dispensation system. But in Uganda, it doesn't work like that in Uganda. You know it very well. So it won't succeed in Uganda. That's why I can tell you it won't succeed. And if you look at all the dictatorships in the world, they rule for a very long time. When they're about to leave power, right? They always leave they always leave a country in ruins. So for Uganda, it's very obvious. Why do I say this in the first place? The way the father has been running the country, right? I don't think his son have the same brain to run the country. And he doesn't, of course. Given his tweets, you don't need to ask man. Given his tweets, man just wakes up early morning and he tweets whatever he wants to tweet, and he doesn't even edit what he tweets. Can such a person run a country like Uganda, a country of 45 million people?
How about, like, what exactly happened in Congo? Isn't it the same thing? Did Kabila replace his dad when he became president of the DRC? I think it also happened in Togo as well as Malawi and Mauritius.
In Mauritius, happened in Mauritius?
Well, the founding father of Mauritius, the son of the founding father, ended up becoming president of Mauritius.
But I told you, they follow the democratic path.
Right.
Fine. How as much as you're trying to use the democratic path to bring him to power, but there there are lots of laws being broken before they bring him to power. First of all, have Ugandans accepted him? No. Are Ugandans ready for his presidency? No. Right? Is this in a serving man? Is this in a uniform? Yes. Then why is he playing politics at the political time? Why are they hiding it so much? You see how it's being done? It's being done in the kangaroo way, in a Machiavelli way. It's being done in the Al Capone way. They're trying to smuggle him in very fast. I don't even know why. There's a lot of hiding in everything. There's too much hiding to this Muhoozi project. I don't even know why, by the way.
Right.
The man who just wakes up all of a sudden one morning, he's retired from the army. Then, before you know it, I'm now going to do it in 3031. In 20, it's 3031?
Yeah.
Something like that. So
yeah, 2031. Yeah, 2031.
How do you play with such sensitive information on the future of a 45 million people in Uganda? How do you play with such sensitive information? What kind of play are you going to make?
Can we figure out why the army is silent about the events that are happening right now? I know retired General Mugisha Muntu talked about the events that are going on surrounding Besigye, and he says that we are in a dilemma right now. Actually, the solution he gave us is for us to actually pray for this country. But as a retired general, what do you think retired generals should do, including Major Mugisha Muntu, who was the first commander of the UPDF? What should retired generals do to ensure that active members of the UPDF have their voice, speak out? Can it happen?
Sorry, it's very unfortunate I'm going to speak about this, but I can tell you, first of all, even the army itself is in captivity already, if you didn't know that. Two, we are talking of a transition. Do you already know? Most Ugandans may not see this. Do you already know that a transition is already taking place in Uganda now? Do you know that there's a transition is already taking place in Uganda? Do you know that?
It looks like, well, if a son can organize a national birthday, apparently there are also events happening in other parts of the country. Many people are asking why he was so interested in celebrating his 48th birthday in Kampala instead of celebrating it in either Tanzania or Western Uganda.
You see, the
I
old
wonder
guards,
what your thoughts are.
I just have a lot to tell you about this. The old guards have been phased out. Ugandans are not seeing this already. The old guards, the main actors of 1981 to 86, do you still see them very active? Are they still very active in the military? No, they have all been phased out. The ones who are in charge right now, people directly deal with the imposter. The ones who are in charge right now are the imposter's age mates. Our age group, in a way, are the ones running the system right now. So if you talk of what Muntu was saying and General Muntu was saying, General Muntu is a friend, of course, who work together. General Muntu and the Besigye were saying, let me tell you this. Whatever the Muntu say, yes, they will just tell us what we need to know and act upon it. The Muntus played their part, right? Besigye played their part. At the time when there was bad policy in Uganda, like they claim, of course, they picked up arms and went and fought the sitting government of that time. And they came to power. Played the role they're supposed to play. When things started going wrong, they left. They can talk, yes, but they can't do much. People don't know this. I've worked with them very closely. Yes, they can talk, but they can't do much. The people can only do much. Are the youth. If they say 90% of the population in Uganda is the youth, it is the Salis of today, the Ogilis of today, live in the comfort zone of the so-called Western world, and we go and face, we go and deal with the nuisance in Kampala. The Muntus won't do much. And let me tell you this, next 5 years from now, I don't think they'll be playing a bigger part in our politics anymore. It's going to be those young guys coming up. The Bobbies are not going to play all these roles. The Salis of today are not going to play this role. Yes, the messages can talk, but they won't do much. Trust me, they won't do much. And some of the seniors who are so vocal, let me add on to this. Some of the seniors who are so vocal that we know, where are they today? They either been silenced. If not silenced, they have been eliminated mysteriously, and nothing comes up. They just die mysteriously. People who are opposed to that project a lot, either been silenced or disappear. They just die mysteriously, and you don't even know what happened. And it has been happening for some time. Uganda, being Ugandans, are quiet about it.
You know what surprises me a lot is the fact that senior army personnel who have potential influence to deter this from happening, people who have been participating in ensuring that Uganda has a democratic pathway to its governance, those who are able to speak are silent. Those who had the power to speak but did not and ended up being eliminated were also there. I remember Lieutenant General Lokech, very young man, very brilliant. He was eliminated. Apparently, they told us that it was the blood clot, but according to the people in northern Uganda, they are saying that their son was eliminated. Why aren't these deaths not being investigated? We know Chirumira was eliminated. We know Kawesi was eliminated. Oh, these are young, were young army officers. Kazini, Mayombo, all these were young army officers. Were these assassinations systematic to pave way for what we are looking at right now?
I don't even know this, Sally. Let's begin with the Mayombos now, because if you talk of mysterious death in Uganda, let's begin with the Mayombos. Yeah, Mayombo was a very high-profile person in that government. You know it very well. If Mayombo's death, the report could not come up to now, what else do you think will happen with the rest who died after him? Given the caliber of the person who was then, imagine up to now, people don't know what killed him, but it was just a mysterious death, and the government hasn't come up with a public report about what killed him. So what do you think? So when do you think they'll ever come up with reports of other people who died? Now, looking at what Sejusa said, let's just delve on Sejusa here. When he wrote that dossier, was it something to ISO to investigate the alleged plan to assassinate or to get rid of people who are against this man's project, the Impostors project? That was in 2013, right?
Yeah.
People opposed it and they said it's not going to happen, it has never happened, it won't happen. But along the road, this is what happened. People are eliminated in a way. Whoever comes out, their rounders are gone. You don't even know what happens. Today is fine, tomorrow here it's a cardiac arrest. All of that is a cardiac arrest. You wonder how. So lots of people have been going. Then we didn't believe him. Like I told you in Uganda, we don't believe much. We only believe when something now hurts us that bad.
We dismissed him. We dismissed him. We thought he was working for the establishment. Of course, there's always those questions that happen based on his record as a person himself. But he was the first person to reveal, beside Dr. Besigye, he was the first person to reveal that the 2011, I think was it the 2011 elections were rigged. That Besigye won those elections. This was General Sejusa telling us this. But what confuses me the most is people like General Katumba Wamala, whose life has been attempted to be taken away. The fact that he survived that assassination attempt, what is keeping him, even after the loss of his beloved daughter, what is keeping him silent during these very sensitive conversations? Why can't he come out and say what he has to say? I remember General Kasirye Gwanga used to speak his mind, and of course he was also disappeared mysteriously, died mysteriously during the pandemic. There are so many army personnel that have passed on during that pandemic, some of whom we never got to know about because either they didn't want them covered or they just didn't want the populations, the Ugandans to know that these deaths were happening. What is the role of our keepers specifically? I'm putting this to General Katumba Wamala. I understand very well that it must be in a very tight position to say something, but can't he use proxies to say something?
You see, Katumba, of course, if you look at his profile, This man was an army commander before, right? If somebody who was there before him or after him died, Rwanda was there before after him, right? You saw what happened to him, and nothing happened. And this is somebody who was from the inner circle. And see how he died. So why do you think he will talk much that will change anything? You see, at the moment, at this particular time, whatever the first one wants is to keep the status quo. That's all they want, and they will not mind. They won't mind bumping off anyone off their way. Whoever comes that way will have to go. So Katuma Mala could have survived that time. Maybe his time is going to come another day if he doesn't act also now. His time will come another day. He may think they're his friends, but they're not his friend. He may think. Of course, he knows. These people know a lot of things, but they keep quiet about it. If you're not close to them. But I was just trying to delve on what Tinyafuza wrote. Like I told we being Ugandans being Ugandans. He authored all this document, and some of us, of course, didn't believe him. Said, now he's part of them. He's been with them all together. You know this. But to my surprise, whatever this man wrote in 2013 has now come to pass, and it's now happening. Right? Don't we see it? It has come to pass. It's now happening. A person in 1986 whose father was 12 years old today even called the military his army. He hasn't even yet become the president. You know, called the military his army. The army is army. You see what I'm saying?
He did. He did. It does call the army his army, and this is actually reflected in the recent football match between the legislators, and the army. You wonder how the army could engage in a birthday party game. So when he calls it his army, he's not really lying. It is his army. He has recruited it. He is the founder of the SFC, according to some circles. So when he tells Ugandans that is my army, is he really lying? Do you think he's lying?
I don't think he's lying. I don't think he's lying because recently the father even endorsed it already. And you wonder where the super minister went. The father endorsed it recently, a few days ago. The father said, you see, I've been very soft on corruption. Can you imagine this? He's a very dishonest man. He said, I've been very soft on corruption. This is what the father said. But this one who is coming, when you're celebrating the 48th birthday, this one who is coming, I don't think it will be easy. It will go easy with the corrupt official. Imagine, it means the father already giving him a leeway, endorsing the son to become the next president. The father said, okay, of course, it evokes memories of John the Baptist. When he said, that's what the father was saying, it evokes memories of John the Baptist. What did John the Baptist say? For him, he baptized with water, right? But the one who is coming after him, right? Jesus. With fire and the Holy Spirit. Imagine the father was endorsing the son, that for him, he's been soft. He's been soft, right? But the one coming, what does it say? He's been already endorsed and sealed is our next president. There's no doubt about it. Of course, why? Okay, where in this world would a serving general, a serving military general, hold a big birthday party, right? In Lugogo, you're a serving military soldier, you're in uniform, then you hold your birthday for what? Uganda just woke up, I think, in Lugogo. They didn't know that this man was being launched into mainstream politics. Did they know that? That the man was being launched into mainstream politics. So which means the man is already there. The father already endorsed John the coming of the Messiah, which is him now. The father called him the Messiah. He's going to baptize with the fire. You've been seeing what he's been doing. Is it true? Has he been baptized in Uganda with the fire? Very obviously in Karamojo, we saw that. He says and he does it. There was a lot of cleansing, not even butchering, cleansing of Karamojons. So it could be right to call it his army. But the son should know the history of our country. If he does not know the history of our country, they are going to wake up one day and they're going to be in for a rude shock. Because our history is very clear. We've seen people before like him who wielded powers more than even the father. What happened to them today? The Maliamongo died in poverty in Congo. Amin died in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. He never stepped foot in Uganda again. Where did the brother die from? South Africa or Zambia. All these guys wielded a lot of powers then, right? So it's just a matter of time. It's just a matter of time. And the person they're trying to front to become our president, look at his intellect. Look at
very many people have evoked his intellect. Many people have evoked his intellect. Of course, his recent speech at his very own birthday justified the evoking of his intellect. But this is a guy who has gone through some of the most elite military colleges in the world, including the Egypt Military College, the Kalama Ahmad Warfare Training School, the United States Army Command, the United States National Defense College at Fort Leavenworth in Kansas. And even though he did not complete his political science degree at the University of Nottingham, at least he studied for 2 years there. Well, why do you think this guy, despite having been the presidential advisor for the last couple of years before he became before he once again became the lead of the army, why hasn't he oriented himself into the diplomat he calls himself? Because diplomats are usually very good orators. You look at Olalo Tunu. When you start listening to Olalo Tunu, you're like, I want you to continue speaking. This guy couldn't even speak for 2 minutes without first of all, he looked like a drunkard, but even his speech wasn't eloquent. It wasn't coherent at whatsoever. And this is the guy who is supposedly going to be the next president of Uganda. What should we do about this? I've had many of his colleagues, his former schoolmates, saying that he wasn't a very good performer academically. But this guy has gone through very elite military colleges, including Sandhurst and Fort Leavenworth in Kansas City. Why is it that he is not as meticulous in terms of delivering information as he should be?
See, whatever happened during his celebration of the 48th birthday is laughable. Why they say it's laughable? If I were him, right, the first person I would begin by arresting was supposed to be Mwenda, right? There's no doubt about Mwenda being a smart guy. We know this. Before he was compromised, he was a very smart guy. And Ugandans loved him, right?
Yeah.
Now, this man is handled by Mwenda. You see, Mwenda also looks at him like a de facto president if you didn't know. So he's handled by Mwenda, if you didn't know this. So if Mwenda could not transfer his ordinary skills to him, and he's always with Mwenda, he's been with Mwenda for like 10 years, and he failed to give a simple speech. See, I was reading his speech in Lugogo, in Kololo. You see, you could surround yourself with very brilliant people. But if you're dense, trust me, even if you stay with the brilliant people for 100 years, you will go nowhere. I once attended some Islamic conference. There's a Muslim scholar called Abraham Green.
Right.
He spoke a lot of things so intriguing things that caught my attention then. Then I asked him, where do you get all this kind of knowledge? How do I get knowledge like you? This was around 10 years ago. He told me, you want knowledge? I said, yes. I want the kind of knowledge you have. And he had no university degree, by the way, but a brilliant scholar. He knew everything. He told me, you want knowledge? He discussed a lot of things with me. Then he made it very simple. If you want knowledge, surround yourself with people of knowledge. So if had I been Muhoozi, I would have arrested Mwenda first for making him a mediocre. I would have arrested Alan Kasoja. These are brilliant people. But I think they've also tried. They keep quiet, but they have tried. This man is naturally a dense person. This is supposed to lead Uganda. Right? You can't stay with men and be silly. You can't stay with men and be dense. Mwenda is a very bright man. So if had I been Muhoozi, I would have arrested Mwenda. First time. Because
but if you say that they have tried and they have just given up on him, what justification would he have to arrest Mwenda? Especially if they have tried to mentor him and they have tried to coach him. Is it just the imposter syndrome that is still surrounding him, and eventually he'll become better? Or do you think this guy is natural? We are doomed because this guy is naturally.
You see, a privileged background does not amount to a brain. You coming from a privileged background does not mean you're going to be smart upstairs, right? He's from a privileged background. In fact, his ways remind me of these kids who went to school in primary school and secondary. All they care about is playing station, playing those video games. He must have been playing a lot of video games in his high school days and primary school days. Because you can't be with a father who has been the president of Uganda at the helm of power for 40 years, all kind of 40 years, and you don't master anything, and you can't give even a simple speech at Lugogo. Imagine I was speaking at Kololo. I'm like, no, look at our president. Look at our president. I would even borrow a word from this brilliant man here, a lawyer in Kampala. It's called the Lord Mayor. That's
Lugogo. Yeah.
What did that was say? What did he say? Mutu Jozo nyene muitao. When I look at how the guy was giving a speech, why he was addressing people, you see the youth. I know what the youth are. I know their problems. We shall be putting a lot of money into sports. Since when? You're seeing it today, and that's how you talk. In Kololo and Lugogo.
And mind you, his so-called mother, his alleged mother, is the Minister of Education, which is the helm of sports, the umbrella of the sports ministry. And
she failed to do all this. Do you know, in Kololo and Lugogo, he had the chance to redeem himself. He had the chance to pull it off with the ordinary skills. He had the chance to pull it off in Lugogo. Right. Did he do that?
No.
He showed a lot of. He's so naive. This guy is so naive. I personally won't allow him to be my president. I won't allow him to be my president.
Yeah.
He will be any other person president, but not my president. I'll make sure I fight him to the end.
But that's not the reality. Most of us have dismissed Mr. Museveni as not being our president, and many people are calling Mr. Kyagulanyi their president. Others are calling Mr. Besigye their president. But the reality is that those people that we might be associating with, they don't have real power. They don't have tangible power. The person who has tangible power right now in Uganda is Mr. Museveni, and that's why he's able to pull off all this nonsense that is going on, including endorsing his son's birthday party.
Sorry, I told you in Uganda everything happens. The truth is, we're in captivity. And the truth is that Muhoozi's father wields power. We know this. We could call anyone president, right? But if they don't work hard to get that power from that family, they will continue calling people president for years. They will continue calling other people presidents for years. All we need right now is state power. And the problem is, you see, his father's been so smart. Why do I say this? You see, at times to give credit where it's due. His father's been so smart. There was a man called, he was a slave owner in the West Indies, English West Indies, in British West Indies. It was called William Lynch.
Yeah.
The fathers ruled Uganda like William Lynch. What did William Lynch say? The slave owners in the US, right? In the US that at that time had failed to deal with violent slaves. You see? So they wondered how William Lynch had very few people and he had the big number of slaves in the West Indies and they were very loyal to him. Then they wondered how he was using it. Then they called him to come and address them it was in Virginia, St. James River, something like that. So he talked to the slave owners then why their slaves were violent. This is what he told them. Listen, you don't use violence on these people. It's very simple. That's what the father has been using on Uganda. This is what he said. Pit the old against the young, right? Then pit the colored one. You see, in the US or during the slave days, even up to now, the black ones don't deal much with the light skin. Just pit the old against the white and pit the light skin one against the dark skin one. And that's it. If you use that, you'll manage slaves for 300 years without any violence, using any violence on them. Create difference amongst them. That's what the father's been doing. He's been a master of divide and rule. What happened? Today, instead of Ugandans focusing on the main prize, which is the presidency, what are we doing? We are busy abusing each other. You find Mao taking on Noob taking on Mao. So where should Mao waste all that kind of energy? In fact, during the slave days, we'd call a man like Mao, Uncle Tom, right? We'd call him Uncle Tom. All the energy he's using on Noob, why didn't he focus on the first family? Why didn't he point out? Mao is a brilliant man. He's a lawyer. Don't you think he sees what's happening in Uganda? Don't you think he sees what's happening and he knows it? Why is he so quiet about it? Why is he using all his energy on fighting a small group which has just come out? Right? So, if you look at his father, all this was done by his father. So he's been a master of manipulation. So I could call him his father the William Lynch of our time. It has worked for him for so many years. Divide and rule. And he likes it. He's at the helm and we are fighting each other here. The only time Ugandans came together, right? I can tell you this. The only time Ugandans came together and it worked. They should have been citing that example. It was only in Tanzania. There were so many different groups, but because there was one big problem at that particular time, that was Idi Amin. What happened? They forgot about their difference. They had their difference already. They forgot their differences, merged together, and Amin was removed. Then the differences came in afterwards. That's what they should be doing with President Museveni now with his son. Forget all our differences, come together first, get rid of him. When we get rid of him, then we shall now sort ourselves later. Because
Ugandans,
if we don't do that, I'm worried, right? The 50-year project plan will likely come to pass, but it won't pass in our time.
Well, we keep saying that it won't pass in our time. We thought that was 2021 was that time we was living. But Ugandans have gotten so many chances to get rid of Museveni. In 2009, the Kayunga riots almost got rid of the Museveni establishment. We gave up and we let them reorganize themselves to consolidate their power to where it is right now. In 2016, a similar incident happened, this time in Kasese. The rest of the country did not say anything. A few people came out to speak something, but even up to now, the Omsinga of the Rwenzururu is in exile in Buganda, and no one mentions these events. Well, which other chances are we going to get to unseat the dictatorship if we have missed all these very pivotal moments to get rid of the dictatorship? Mario.
Is she on?
Marion, unmute yourself. I'm not sure if you're speaking.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I am. Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, network issues. So I would say that I wouldn't call them, how can I say, missed opportunities per se. I would call them let me say progressive tries, tries and errors, and people keeping on fighting. Actually, those moments in time and in history, just a representation that people keep on fighting. It's very hard to fight a regime that has all the monopoly over violence, and you have nothing to fight back. You have no guns, you have no resources, you have no money. You're civilians with nothing. If a war was to start now, most of us would not know how to fight back. Most of us would have, against a gun, maybe would have our knives and our pangas, and will be assassinated, violated. We have had a history of violence. We just came out of the LRA war just recently. So Ugandans are cautious of the price of war and what it takes to remove a government, especially through violent means. That is why most times they're hesitant, to go all the way. And when it comes violent, they kind of push back because they know that they are weak and they are not able to mount the resistance that is needed. Is that to say that there haven't been countries where civilians have come out and fought a government? Yes, they have been. We have our counterparts in Egypt. We have our counterparts, the Arab Spring, for example. We have our counterparts in Sudan itself, purely a civilian movement. But you also see how the military then hijacks those movements, those civilian movements, and produces more of the same. You get. It takes a lot to sustain an unarmed civilian movement. It takes a whole lot more to actually achieve the victory and the kind of democracy or the results that you want. Most of the time you will be hijacked. Most of the time things happen and and it basically does not work out. It's only a few times, and those few times have happened whereby insiders have negotiated power. The military interim government that goes in then decides to have an election. Sometimes if you're unlucky, they put in a pseudo candidate, and that person continues more or less the same as what they've had. So as African countries, we have really struggled. We have struggled to take control of our destinies and our rule of law and our democracy. I wouldn't say that. Okay, perhaps would we call it a failure? I don't think so, given the fact that these are systems of violence that we inherited from our colonial masters, and we haven't yet matured to that level of being able to break them down and then being able to stand on our own. It also comes with a certain level of economic, empowerment. You do not expect Ugandans to sustain what it needs to take over government when most of them are living hand to mouth. A
Right.
hungry man always thinks about, how do I survive?
Yeah.
What is the next meal? They are not thinking like us. For us, we are not hungry people. We have, as elites, we have gone above a certain level, above the poverty line, so we can afford to think about politics, and we can afford to think about the future of our country. But for most citizens and people, Ugandans, that is not a reality. They are thinking, okay, I've eaten H commando today. How do I
Right.
survive tomorrow?
Right.
And most times, those are the tools that dictators will use to keep you down, keep you in chains. Control the level of access you have to wealth, so that they're the only people who have, and they can manipulate it according to how they want and how they want you to respond. Um, we were talking about also the divide and rule,
Yeah.
that comes in, the tribal aspects. And you were asking, why is it that people sat down and watched the Musinga being taken away and people killed in Kasese? And we always go back to the same thing we always talk on the show, that perhaps people think it was a Bakonjo thing, not necessarily a Ugandan thing.
Right.
The concept of this country called Uganda has not sunk into a lot of people's minds. That's why whatever happens in Buganda then becomes a Buganda thing, and all of us say that's between the Kabaka and his people. And
Yeah.
you wouldn't find the Bakonjo talking about it, or people in the north talking about it. So there's so many issues and so many reasons why what seem to be pivotal moments in history do not materialize. But I think for me, it goes to the main, to the deep. If we just look at it on the surface, we won't be able to tackle it, but we need to take it to the deep root. Is the system that we inherited, that even if it's Obote today, I mean tomorrow, you will need a leader who cares enough about this country to systematically break down the system of oppression that was left by the colonial masters, and not break it down just so that he can control the system, but break it down so that he can create a system that is sustainable enough, that for the betterment of all Ugandans. And to get, I don't know how countries like China and Singapore got such leaders. I don't know the mechanisms which people use to get such leaders, but that's what needs to happen in Uganda, but across the African continent, because our forefathers fulfilled the first task, and that was getting us political liberation.
Right.
They needed to be a generation that continues that struggle. The definition, what does what actually okay, they gave us pseudo political liberation, but what does actually political liberation mean? Can you have political liberation when you are still you still have ties to the IMFs and you still get donor money. Because even when we look at resistances, how do these resistances fail? You will see that the person who is providing the weapons to the NRM government are Western powers. They continue to give them resources, they continue to fund them, they continue to have military bases that are manned by these African leaders, by Museveni himself. If you look at the number of US military bases that he mans and helps man on behalf of the US government, where are his people trained? Where are the Muhoozis trained? Who funds those scholarships? You get. So it's not just a surface thing of saying Museveni must go. There's so many things that, and this is across the African continent, there's so many things that you just need to break down as, particularly as activists and the leaders of today and those who want change, that it is not enough for just to look at that this particular dictator should go. We should also look at the structure, the superstructure that holds him together, the superstructure that allows him to even think that he could bring his son to replace him. That superstructure needs to go along with him. I particularly have followed I think our brothers and sisters in West Africa have come to that realization, and perhaps because for them it's more direct, the influence that this colonial superstructure has on them is quite direct, them being able, for them directly, half of the money resources they make just goes directly to the French government. So theirs is blunt. Their weakness, their economic weakness is quite, their exploitation is quite blunt. But you have seen that they have said, okay, no, there has to be an end to the neo-colonialism. There has to be an end to how we allow you to interfere in our democracy and choose for us leaders, or we have to curtail how you are able to keep these tyrants in power. Because the way that people like Museveni are kept in power, there are also external forces, from our history, the way that most African leaders can ascend is they first seek for the Western approval. We cannot run away from that. And even if they go to the seat without Western approval, to sustain that seat, they need it. Those are things that we need to unpack. Why is it suddenly that even with the tyranny on which Kagame has ruled the people of Rwanda, he seems to have a clean and the proper Uganda machinery around him. He's projected as this benevolent,
right.
He's the example of leadership, to the West. Why is it like that? And we know the atrocities that go on in his country. The same thing for a long time, Museveni was projected that way, even when he was killing and massacring people. To the rest of the world, oh, he's a benevolent dictator. Oh, he's bad, but he's not so bad. There are people who are worse than him, but he's killing people. He is suppressing suppressing freedom. Like, he's doing so many atrocities, but he's protected because the people who control your economy, the people who control your resources, need him to be in that position. So even when we're talking about Museveni must go and then the Muhoozi project, there are certain things we also need to look at, Why does he feel like it's important for him to project Muhoozi? It's important for Muhoozi to project himself as someone who can bring peace within the East African region. Because those are one of the qualifiers that he needs to fulfill, so that he can replace his father in this region. I don't know if you get me. His father.
I do definitely get you. Do you think that's the reason he appeared on his birthday in a full combat, to project that sense of security to the stakeholders outside?
Can I come in a bit?
Yeah,
Mariam?
Yes, he
Can I ask you a question, Mariam?
needs to show that.
Marion, can I ask you a question? Sorry for interrupting you.
Yes,
Can I ask you a question?
yes, please.
Do you know our history very well?
Yes.
Does the current prevailing situation in Uganda calls for a peaceful change of power? When a serving
Yes,
officer,
please go ahead.
when a serving officer is being launched into mainstream politics, when a serving officer is calling
There's
a
a what?
military. Okay. Did you get it and maybe relate to her properly? I asked you if you know our history very well. Does it make any sense to you for a serving officer, right, to call a national army his army? Does it make any sense to you for a serving officer, a man in the military, to celebrate his birthday and being launched into mainstream politics and abusing the military conduct?
Well, the thing is that what is
No,
happening in Uganda today is unprecedented because it has never been there before.
Yeah, it's a simple question I'm still asking her. That the prevailing situation today of what I've mentioned about calls for a peaceful, does it call for a peaceful change of power in Uganda? Do you see it? Do you see events? Do you think it qualifies Uganda for a peaceful change? Like you're saying?
Well, I will answer you, Maurice, that we have always had violent changes of government.
Okay, one more
You
question.
see, our history has taught
I'm
us
sorry for
that
interrupting you.
military coups. I belong to a different. I belong to a different. I belong to a different maybe thought process. That knowing the history of my country, that the only way that we have changed governments, yes. Yeah, it's unprecedented, a military man joining politics and all that, but there have been military men taking over governments throughout our history. The only civilian president we had were two, maybe Mutesa and Obote, and we know how power was handed over to them in particular, and we know the events that then led to others raising up. The changes of government that we have had, even Obote himself, he had to use the brunt of the military to take over power. Now we need to decide for ourselves, is this the trend that we are going to constantly take? That every time we have a problem, we solve it through the military? Always, it is the military that is at the heart and the center of our politics. That is where the problem, that is the root of the problem. That if you continue to let the military be your knight in shining armor, that in order for you as
Sorry?
in order for you to
Let her finish. Let her finish.
No,
let her finish. Let her finish. Proceed, Mario.
in order for you to gain power, in order to sustain power, you need the military. Then you should not be surprised that every leader that comes on will always use the military to suppress the citizens and make sure they keep you where you are. Even when you go for a military coup right now, and let us just suggest that we are going to use violence, take up arms, and do what Museveni did during his time and come on. How are you going to prevent that group of militia from again doing the same atrocities that Museveni's government did? What power do you have as a citizen who is a non-military man to control a group that is armed? That's the problem with military coups. It never ends. It's a cycle of violence. You know, it continues like that, day in, day out. You will never find an end to it. It will be today Museveni's school, then maybe tomorrow Maurice's school, then tomorrow Henry Sally's school, then tomorrow Marion's school. Violence upon violence, and there will be no semblance. There is no end to it. There is no peace in between. Because how are you going to prevent the next militia army man who takes over power from making sure that his son ends up in the same position that he wants him to end up? After all, the military is there to protect him and to ensure that the country does what he wants.
Right. Maurice, your thoughts? I think you have written down a couple of points to respond.
Marion.
No, without asking her questions, just respond to what she has said.
Well, let me respond to what she said, but
and offer your
Marion,
position.
We all want a peaceful change of power in Uganda, right? But with the prevailing situation, with the so-called imposter in charge and making arrogant statements, bragging of how he arrested so and so and tortured. Do you see a peaceful change of power in Uganda? If one person is still playing the same old politics of 1970s, 60s today. You talked of China and Singapore. Did you read this book by Lee Kuan Yew, From the Third World to the First World? Do you know the mechanism they used to transform Singapore from the third world to the first world? Do you know how ruthless he was with the opponents, best friends? Do you read that book? From the first world to the founding father of Singapore, from the first world to third world, from the third world to first world. Did you read that book? You did, right? If you did, then you'd know that in Uganda we should use Lee Kuan Yew's theory in Uganda for Uganda to work, to be a functioning state. As we're talking now, we're right now talking about a failing state. It's not working. Lee Kuan Yew fought corruption, right, Marion, by arresting his close friends. Before they came to power, he told them, look, this is government, this is public fund, this is public this. Do not dip your fingers into public coffers. The ones who went against it, the Kutesas of Singapore then, I'm giving a very good example here. The Kutesas, the Muhoozi of Singapore then, went to prison and they were dismissed with disgrace in Singapore. He was an authoritarian leader. He was a ruthless leader. The moment these guys came out of prison, they were dismissed and all their loot confiscated. Did anyone ever dip their fingers into public coffers in Singapore? No. That's why you see Singapore where it is today. In Uganda, Jim Muhoozi robs, and in the next cabinet, he bounces it back. In Uganda, this guy is called Mukula robs, and the next cabinet is back. So do you see the will to even fight corruption in Uganda? Right now,
Singapore is not really. We are talking about creating a democratic state, right? Singapore is not really a democratic state in the sense of.
She talked about it. She talked about it. That's why I came in and gave that example. How this man was ruthless with his friends. How this man treated his friends. Right now, look at Uganda today. Madam, listen. We all want to see a peaceful change of power in Uganda. None of us is calling for violence in Uganda. I myself want to see a peaceful change in that country called motherland. But look at the prevailing situation in Uganda today.
But even besides that, what I'm asking Maurice is that how does he ensure? How do you, Maurice?
Ahead.
Let me ask you.
Go ahead.
How do you ensure, Maurice?
Go ahead. I can hear you. Go ahead.
He hears. Marion, ask your question. Internet. Yeah, you can proceed with your question.
How do you ensure? Because if we talk about dictators, Uganda has had its full of dictators. How do you ensure that the next dictator is going to? How do you ensure that the next dictator is going to do what Singapore's dictator did, or what China's dictator did? You have had so many dictators in your country, military after military regime.
So, you see, we may not go even beyond here because the answer will still be the same. Do you see ourselves, okay, the people in power now, do you see them doing anything different from the previous government? Or they've been doing much worse than the previous government did?
Of course.
If somebody brags, give an example in this, the just recently concluded election, somebody abducts. Were there gross human rights abuse in Uganda in the concluded election? Yes. And the first son goes and brags about it. Is it doing Uganda any good? And how do you change that? Through prayers? We go to Christ the King and pray?
Well, that's what General Muntu told us. He asked us to pray for the country.
Okay. So we should go to church and pray. Rosaries, right?
It was. I think it wasn't being. I think it was just being. That was a rhetorical I think reference. Rhetorical reference. It didn't really mean that kneel down and pray.
Is she still online?
Yeah, she's online. She came back.
Okay, Marion.
Address the entire issue together.
Because I think
we are here to learn from each other. Yeah.
Okay, I personally believe in Moses' law.
Sorry.
I believe in Moses' law.
Can you guys hear me now?
Okay,
we do hear you.
My network is so bad.
Okay.
Yeah, I was still saying, how do you ensure that the next dictator does not act the same way? That you are not creating another Museveni in the process. That's the tricky thing about military takeovers. You as a citizen, you as a citizen or a civilian cannot hold them responsible or accountable, because either way, you didn't bring them in power in the first place. So it becomes so tricky in that way. Have on the other hand, non-violent movements whereby it is a hard struggle um most of the time, and I am not saying that in non-violent movements there is no violence. Of course, when the state comes up and it wants to suffocate the people are tortured and and suppressed, and it takes longer. But the beauty about it is that when you succeed, the fearlessness that people have, first of all, to protect the victory of the government that they have succeeded in getting in the first place. It builds a citizenship that are fearless and are able to take and fight for their own democracy. That's the first thing. But secondly, you have a right to that government. You don't have people saying that, you didn't go to the bush with us, so you can't say anything. Shut up. This is a freedom that I fought for me and my family, and not for the rest of Ugandans. What is your stake in this Uganda that I have fought for? You have no stake. You have no belonging in this Ugandan government that I have fought for. But when a citizen is the one who has fought for their stake, is the one who has owned their own struggle and said, no, this is my country. I have a right to it. I have a right to this sort of democracy. I have shed blood. I have gone to war, not in that violent way of, let me say, let us go in a militia, but in the, how can I give the example of the Sudan way, that the people have rose up. The people continuously asking their governments for accountability is what I'm talking about. It is different from a person picking 27 men and 27 guns and going to fight and overthrow a government. That is not the kind of, how can I say that is not the kind of movement that it's what we have been having,
Yeah,
what I'm trying to tell Morris is that it's what we have been having. There has to be a change, that every time someone goes to the bush and overthrows a government, we have more of the same. So there has to be a change in how we take over a government. There has to be a method in which we take over government where the citizen also feels part of this government, not continuing the colonial superstructure of, I will put for you someone there, and in order for that person to be there, they have to have all this military might around there to keep this thing called Uganda together.
right.
The
Your
missing
thought,
link in this thing we call Uganda, to me as a person, is that we haven't been able to fight for it as Ugandans. We haven't been given the chance to have a stake in it as Ugandans. Forget about these militias, but I'm talking about you, Morris, a civilian, eh? With Henry as a civilian and saying that this is my country. You will never, the patriotism that those Sudanese people have right now, and the belief and the solidarity in their country that they have right now, will never be measured. You will never
right.
see it anywhere, at least in their neighbors that are around them. You can never bulldoze those people again because they have fought for their freedom. And that is why even when military wanted to put a puppet leadership, they were able to stand up and say, man, we have fought so hard to get rid of dictators. You are not going to put another dictator in his place.
Morris, your thoughts?
That is my thinking as a person.
Yeah.
That is my chain of thought. Because for me, looking at our history, these things of we go to the bush, we go to the bush, we go to the bush.
Marion, now they should throw this question to Uganda now. Now,
Yeah.
how do we deal with the current situation now? because we have to use the Holy Spirit, we have to use the Bible, or we have to use the rosary to get rid of this man who calls the military his army. He's not even the president.
The leader of the gang, yeah.
Yes. How do you deal with it now? We can't even talk of the next president before dealing with this person. We can't talk of the next president or the next government coming before dealing with this person. This man is there for continuity. He's supposed to continue the father's legacy. So how do you even talk of the next government before dealing with this man here? How do you do it? Malcolm X says the future belongs to those who prepare for it today. Are we preparing for our future today? If you're still allowing a man go hold a national birthday using taxpayers' money, right? Torturing Ugandans, calling it his army, miming Karamo Jones. So how do you even prepare for the next government you're talking about? That will even exist? What you should know, or what Uganda should know, and Marion should know, at least in our lifetime, we are going to see a change. That's very obvious. Museveni is not immortal, right? We're in our maybe mid evenings. For him, it's in his evenings, right? So whether you want or not, he is going to die. That's very obvious. So we shall see that change. We shall see that change. But what kind of change do you want to see? A change where his son takes over? Are we going to be comfortable with the kind of change?
I think the question right now Mariam has is that what do we do with Muhoozi? When we are powerless right now, we have no military might, and I think her thoughts are that we cannot deal with gangish change of government. So 3 people, 5 people, 10 people coming up together and bringing along their vision to change the government in Uganda. I think her thoughts are that we should mobilize Ugandans to own this liberation, so that it is a Ugandan liberation as opposed to 27 people coming up and supposedly alleging to liberate a country when it did not need liberation at the time. Do you think Ugandans who did not go to the bush right away, who supported these guys when they were in the bush, including some of our parents, do you think they made a very big mistake to conspire with the rebels at the time, as opposed to letting Obote finish up his term and let the multi-party elections happen? What are some of the errors or misdeeds that we must correct, that were done in history, that we must correct right now, even as we talk about the Muhoozi project? Because it seems there's not much talk about Muhoozi, the man himself. He's not that established. There's not so much of a history that he has made himself. But what should we do as Ugandans to undo some of the errors or mistakes that our parents did, that our grandparents did in the process of creating a Uganda that Ugandans should feel patriotic about? Because right now, it seems the pluralism within which Uganda was formed is still embedded within people's thoughts. I am a Muganda, I am a Mkonjo, I am a Luo. And like I think about the Rot as my king. I think about the Kawaka as my king. I think about the singers. My king, what happens in Buganda is none of my business. If I am a Musoga, what happens in Kasese is none of my business. If I'm a Nacholi. How do we bring Ugandans together to create the country that they deserve democratically before the emergency of the impostor diplomat? Anyone of you can answer.
But also maybe to clarify something. I think Maurice maybe is thinks that we're trying to say that, let's just, swallow our fate and all that. No, just to make it clear, that's not what I'm saying.
It's okay, Mario.
That there has been countries that have succeeded in non-violent movements, and in some cases it has been the only way that citizens are able to gain, first of all, build their movements and get more people to join, because people, first of all, feel safe in that movement in particular because it's non-violent, but also it's easier for them to get their message across. Secondly, like I said before, unfortunately, I do not believe in military rule as a person, because I think it's one of the biggest challenges of Africa and African countries. I do not believe that creating another Muhoozi or another Museveni is the solution to our problem. That's why I will be quite hesitant if anyone told me, come and let us start a rebel group, because that doesn't create cohesion. It does not build the kind of critical mass that you need to actually, it's not sustainable, first of all, because when you come back and you have been the only one fighting, and maybe by some stroke of good luck you have succeeded, Museveni has gone. Maurice, nothing is stopping you from being another Museveni in your own right. That is the fear that I have with that kind of strategy of going to the bush and doing the same things that that generation. Nothing is stopping you, because after all, you took yourself there. You took yourself there with a few people that you had. Somehow, by some stroke of good luck, you succeeded. And now someone say Henry Sal is coming to tell you what to do about your own government.
I
No.
know, right?
But also, it doesn't create a citizenship that is invested in its own liberation. You do not have a citizenship that is invested in its own liberation. I will take you to how Moi. We all know how Moi fell
Right.
after a full dictatorship, but it was not military rule that got him out. Am I mistaken or not?
You're right, but the thing is, Kenya
It was
had
not
a.
military rule that.
Different
It wasn't.
history.
It
Different
wasn't.
history.
But institutions in Kenya worked. They still work. We have no
Are
institutions
you
that
sure
work in
that they
Uganda.
worked during Moi's
Yes.
time? Are we sure when he put most of his political prisoners behind bars? The man was a tyrant, you know.
He was.
Okay, of course, maybe Museveni was a bit worse than him, or maybe Museveni had more of the, let me say, the machinery. But I just want to show you an example of where people were able to get out a dictator with
Yeah, but
citizens,
Kenyans,
with only
Kenyans
the
are
citizens. It
patriotic.
took longer. But how do you build that patriotism is what I'm saying. You become part of the struggle. You
Right.
build a citizen that is invested in its own struggle. You cannot have the democracy that you want when people are seeing the messages and the Bobby Wines going to the streets and they're saying that, let Besigye fight our battles for us. Bobby said that you're not to be kwase chagulanyi. So for us, we could kwasa chagulanyi. Whatever. Like, you can't build. That means there are deeper things that you have to solve before you even think of launching the attack on Museveni.
Right.
Amongst you yourselves, you're not part of the struggle yet. You get, amongst ourselves, we are not part of the struggle yet. It is a struggle for certain people. Your opposition leaders are the ones who care if Museveni goes or not. You get me?
Right.
Perhaps people in the military who want to replace, they are the people who care. And that is the problematic thing for me, for allowing this certain class of people to be the ones who have your democracy in their hands, because they can decide. Since you're not interested, they can decide how to sculpture it. That before we even talk about going to the bush and who is going to follow you there, you are in a country that has been under political violent turmoil. People have lost their loved ones, their lives, since the inception of this country's independence. You cannot go to the north right now and tell them to join a violent to join a militia right now, after the years they have spent with their wounds from the LRA war are still fresh. So you need to find a different way to organize, is what I'm trying to say.
that you can't stop other organizing, but you need to find a different way to organize, and you need to find a way that brings people together. That you have a situation like we saw that took away Arab Moi. Like the citizens are the ones who are saying go, not a certain, intellectual what elite money what that think that they can be leaders, but they should have the rest of the citizens behind them.
Right. The rest of
That's the only way you are going to the rule that you want to sustain. Because these people themselves who went and fought with you will be the ones to be like Gundi. We went with we were part of this struggle. Surely you cannot pick us out.
I know, but we have seen such things happen. For example, in Sudan, the movement that took Mr. Bashir away from the presidency has already been hijacked by the army. And it's no longer a people's-led government. How are we going to manage those inconsistencies?
But you see, there's
hello.
Proceed. Yeah.
You see,
but you see, they are still fighting.
Right.
You see, during the civil rights movement,
even in that situation, Henry Sally, for me, the thing that stands out as a beacon of hope for me is that even when they have seen that the movement is being hijacked, it is the people who are demanding for accountability. It is the people.
All right. Maurice, your thoughts?
Like I told you, with the prevailing situation in Uganda today, the leaders won't change much, right? It is Ugandans going to liberate themselves. That's like Che Guevara. Che Guevara said, we're just there to show them directions. And he said Cubans are going to liberate themselves. And it came to pass. Ugandans have been pushed down the edge by it, and they know it. They know it. That country is sitting on a time bomb. It's just a matter of time. And they're going to liberate themselves. You see, if you read about the civil rights movement in the 60s, between Martin Luther King, of course, I'm not his fan, and Malcolm X, who was a darling of Malcolm X, they disagreed a lot on ideologies. They disagreed a lot. If you know, if you recall the procession of in Memphis, Montgomery, what did Martin Luther King say? Do not be violent. Do not do anything. Don't throw stones at them. But there were snipers on top of the building, sniping people. When was like, we are walking to the promised land. That's why we should do it in Uganda. We should now resign to fate, and we are walking to the promised land. We should be non-violent. I'm not saying we should be violent, but somebody comes at night, picks up a colleague. Look at what happened to Noop. They pick up a colleague tomorrow, they pick up the other day, they pick up the other day, and Bob himself goes and confirms to the public, so and so when didn't come back. This one is still in prison. This one you've never seen. So Uganda just resign to fate and say, okay, let's go work, look for school fees, let them continue like that. Before you wake up after 30 years from now, that country will be in ruins. We shall be the poorest in the whole world. What do? Put a cap, get rid of the privilege system right now. Deal with it now. Deal with it heads on. Deal with it now. So how are we going to do it? You want us to be like Mahatma Gandhi in India? We need to work in Uganda? We need to work in Uganda. Basically, just tried to rally Uganda how many times? Did it work? How many times did you try to rally Uganda? Did it work?
I think the reason why Dr. Chiza Besigye hasn't been successful, and that's the same reason why General Muntu is not yet successful. It's because the lack of trust from the vast majority of Ugandans.
So why didn't you work with Bobby?
No, but also
why didn't you work with Bobby as well?
Even with that, but also, like I said, you have not been able to bridge the divisions by these tribal things. And that's why I'm saying that even if you were to go your way, Maurice, if you still have those divisions of or your message, or that one is a Westerner, they are in cahoots with Museveni and they are just spies. Bobby or your Muganda, if you've been to be a Kawaka, let them fight their own wars. Mau, those are northerners. Those northerners tortured us. They came and they killed a lot of our people. If you are not able, you will never build something that is sustainable. If you cannot, as a leader, perhaps this is our biggest thing as leaders. If we cannot be able to bridge those divisions that are right from colonial, they come changing their head. That the president of Uganda must solve the Buganda question. They must solve the northerner question. They must surely. All these problems, culture things that we need to solve, that to an extent that we had to make sure that we one of our presidents, in order to get rid of this, just remove the institutions of cultures and kingdoms to give himself peace. If Ugandans are not able, even if it's in the opposition, if they cannot build the bridges between themselves, if Besigye and Bobby Wine cannot sit, a Muganda and then naturally cannot sit, you will continue to see. Even if you bring your movement, the first thing that one knowing you is going to say, those Baganda, they are using what they're using Bobby. They went and striked. Those Baganda went and striked when our son was suffering. You get, like, this is a leader, he's at the helm of an arm of government, but he's saying these statements out in public because he knows the power of divide. He knows that is all it takes for him to divide you. He doesn't use it simply just for the sake of using it. He knows its power. So if you're not able to bridge and create a cause that everyone can see themselves as a Ugandan and not, let me say, naturally first and a Buganda first and a what, you're going to have more of the same. You will go to the bush, you will come back, because let me say, Sally's from Buganda. Buganda will be the first one to eat from the national cake. Marion is a Mukonjo. Her government is in power. She went there alone with her fellow Wakonjo. What do you have to tell her?
Right. Maurice, as we wrap up this conversation, how do you respond to that? What are your thoughts on how we should proceed, especially in the midst of the emergence of the impostor diplomat?
You see, Madon came in late. She came in late, but I talked about William Lynch here. But like she said, she also write about it. Uganda, Muganda not dealing with, and actually Mulango not dealing with so and so. If we emphasize on unity, what is killing Uganda is unity. You hadn't yet come on the show. You hadn't logged into the show when I was talking about this. That the only time Uganda was united was in the 70s when they were hosting Amin. They all came together and buried their differences. Those differences only emerged after Amin had gone. So if you could only come together, trust me, there will be history. But this division created by William Lynch, of course, that division is created by that man in power. He's a master of manipulation, pitting tribes against this one against that. If we do not come together and do that, we are going to be wasting our time. We shall be wasting our time. We need to start preparing for the future now. Otherwise, we shall waste our time. That imposter, of course, won't be my president. His father will be gone soon. We shall wrest of power from him. Manu may ask how, but we shall wrest of power from him. It won't come on a silver platter. I don't assure you. We are going to wrest of power.
But we have been saying about
a man who can't address a few hungry Ugandans that come to eat meat. How will he even handle power? A few people who had gathered to come and eat meat and you can't talk to them, and you think you can be my president? We are going to wrest of power from him. That will come.
But you said he has Mwenda. You said he has Alan Kasuja. You said
he can't take in anything. His brain can't take in anything. You should fire them. His brain can't take in anything. You should fire Mwenda. You should arrest Kasuja because his brain can't take in anything. That's the person who wants to be our president. The father trying to entrust him with the power. We shall see.
I know, but this is the guy who happened to block a deal that opened those borders. So,
look, listen to this. You're in a sovereign state, the other person in another sovereign state. Look, you're in another sovereign state, the other person is president of another sovereign state, but you're here praising a person in another sovereign state to be your uncle. So how should you deal with a person like you? Are you even fit to be a president? Are you even a Ugandan? Calling another person in a sovereign state your uncle. Yet you know very well the history they have in our country and what we went through because of that so-called state. So how do you entrust such a person to power? You know the history you have, their history in Uganda. You know it very well. How many Ugandans are made by the so-called people he's calling uncle? So that's the person we want to entrust with our power today. Anyway, it will happen in his father's dream, but not in our dream. It won't happen in our dream. It won't happen in our time. We shall fight it though, and it's going to fail. He is bound to fail. He's going to fail. Ugandans should know that.
You heard it from the state of the nation. Marion, as we wrap up this conversation, I know the internet has been very unfair to you, but you always bring very interesting and informative perspectives on these conversations. So I wonder what your thoughts are as we wrap up and how we should proceed.
First of all, on was this controversial things, it beats my understanding how a man with so much resources and so many political advisors is says that spews the kind of rubbish he does on Twitter. But also I think that you see, and this is just my thinking, I think that the whole people power movement, there's a way that it's changed our politics as we know it, and we can't take anything away from that particular movement. But I also feel like it pushed the Muhoozi project nearer. You see, because this was a clash, it looked like a clash between a young and older generation, and of which Museveni was so disadvantaged in that playground. You know, he is an old cadre, he's a military man, like he's everything that our generation is not. And so we can't relate to him easily, you know. But then he meets this young challenger for his throne, and he's quite perplexed on how to go about. This boy uses social media, this boy is on Twitter, he's used to his radio and TV things. It was a whole different ball game for him. So I think in so many ways that, and then the fact that, you know, and not to take anything from Bobby or anything, the fact that this boy was not of, his caliber of academic, his requirements. Museveni, at least forget about this election where he put a lot of fishermen and women. He was a person who used to surround himself with the most brilliant minds, and always at all times would like to show the world, project that picture of intelligence, and I have studied this and that, and you quote Simanyi, Napoleon and all those things. But then your challenger is a guy who has a diploma in music. You get me? So how do you go about this opponent that fate has given you?
Does that justify
like him?
I wonder
we
whether that
like him in Muhoozi.
I know, right? Does that justify bringing Muhoozi ahead of his?
Yes. So you have to bring Muhoozi closer, but you also have to brand him in a way that is ridiculous. You're almost mocking your opponent. You get? So you bring a younger version. You bring a younger version that is on Twitter ranting and always on Twitter and spewing shit. And then you also, since your opponent is from a kind of ghetto gangster kind of thing, then you put their parties and you try to blend in. You get it? So you create that you try to fit in to your opponents, to your opponents what? To your opponents,
Image.
how can I say, should I call it lifestyle? You know, because your opponent's
image,
lifestyle is he comes from a background of music and all that. You get, so you so you try to mimic him, although I feel like, yes, to mimic his image, but although in mimicking his image you are doing it in such a mocking way, you get,
right.
yes. So I feel like that's why the Muhoozi project was brought nearer, to try to create a challenge, but also to bastardize the whole people power struggle and what what it stands for. You get, to kind of ridicule it, But on the change that we want to see on the way forward,
how we proceed.
I think that we don't have all the answers right now. All we can do is, sit down and, continue to strategize, continue to fight on, continue to improvise new ways to forward, to push the struggle further. But to me, my biggest, yes, we can't give up. I'm not saying we should give up, but also we should be able to sit down and say, okay, this didn't work. So how can we reinvent ourselves? How can we improvise? How can we make it, better? How can we further ourselves? Okay, how can we, bring something bigger and better that can actually work? But for me, I think our biggest undoing is the issue of division. Even when we start with our leaders who are supposed to lead the way in the opposition, as long as we cannot cross and bridge that political divide, that tribal divide, that perhaps religious divides that keep us apart, we will never be able this guy cannot be ousted with just a one-man army. The challenges that we have you can't do it individually as a Mucholi or as a Muganda or as a Mukonjo alone. You need this thing called Uganda. Either way, you cannot run away from it. So until you bring this thing called Uganda in one accord, and these people called Ugandans to actually fight for this thing, even if it's a colonial construct, but it's what they have now. It is hard to change it now. We're already in it. You need to find ways to make them accept it. That is one. After accepting it and say, this is our thing, no matter what we do, we are stuck with this thing and we can't move on further. Yeah.
Sorry, you're off. You're off?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness.
You're off, right?
Well, I was muted, but I eventually unmuted myself.
Okay.
So it's well, you want to say something else before I close?
Yeah, I could just say, if Northerners cannot also, if these Northerners cannot up their game and they think, you see, right now, Northerners think they're part of the government because of the position.
We think.
They think they're part of the government now because of the position. We think we are part of the government. That's what I should say. I'm not part of the government though, but they think. That's what I'm saying. They think. We think we are part of the government because of the so-called hawks. They've been hoodwinked to believe that they're in government because of such positions. In actual sense, they are being played during broad daylight and they can't see it. They can't see it. I can also blame them for that anyway. If you see like the Mao's Uncle Tom's, other people should fight properly come to 2026. But 2026 won't be easy. Ejakuwa body, like Bobby said.
Yes.
Ejakuwa body.
I agree with you. 2026.
You know what bothers me is the fact that we are looking forward to 2026.
That's what Bobby said.
I am not.
We shall see in 2026. It will be hot. We shall all come in.
That is even more problematic. If we are looking forward to 2026, when we know we have no institutions that work, when we know that the vote will be, the election will be stolen again, whether it is with Muhoozi or his father or his uncle, one of his uncles who lives in Uganda. we know there's no chance that a free and fair election will happen in Uganda. It's not
It
going
will
to
be a
happen.
different ball game.
So
2026
so
could be a different ball game. We shall be sealing his fate by then. It will be
we
a
don't
different
know
ball
that.
game.
We
His father would
don't.
have.
When we are just having these conversations, and I am not saying that conversations are bad. I think this is where ideas start. This is an incubation of ideas where we should be interrogating our own ideas and see how realistic they are in bringing about proper change in Uganda, or tangible change in Uganda. But as long as people like Honorable Matembe's thoughts about what is going on and not propelled by other voices, as long as it's only retired General Tumukunde, retired Kano Kizabe CJ, a few people speaking about what we need, the actual change that we need in Uganda. And as long as we have not taken the initiative to create ownership by Ugandans, all Ugandans, of their project Uganda, because we know that we come from different entities, but we are in this project Uganda that we cannot get rid of right now. A project that has already been taken to the East African Federation, even though we haven't settled issues here at home. A project where now people in central Uganda mostly are struggling to figure out who they should report to regarding their land. Should they report to the Buganda Land Board or the government of Uganda? Who should decide for them? Like, as long as we still have all these challenges and we are not willing to have honest conversations about them, we are still going to have a gang led by Mr. Museveni and his son, and now the family, taking advantage of all of us as Ugandans, plundering our wealth. You remember very well Mr. Museveni calling Bunyoro oil is oil. People of Bunyoro should be collecting that oil, right?
So the son learned those words from the father. My army.
Yeah, my army, my oil. Right?
And Mundu says what we should pray. Mundu says we should pray.
Well, Lieutenant General Mundu told
we should pray.
He told us to pray for the country. But like, what could he say? He is the army. He is a former officer. He understands very well how the army works. If that's what he has to tell us right now, of course, he has done a lot of work trying to educate people, trying to enlighten Ugandans. But of course, Ugandans haven't embraced him, perhaps because of the tribal sentiments that are surrounding our politics in Uganda today.
But also, they don't feel he's radical enough.
I know he's not radical enough, but do we need a radical? Museveni was a radical. Look where he has taken us, right? And Mugisha Muntu has had a record when he was army commander. When it was time for him to leave and retire, he retired. He left, right? He worked for the FDC. When it was time for him to leave the FDC, he left. So he has a record of leaving office, even when.
But you see, if you are to move a people, if you're to move a people to action, usually they need to follow a man who they feel has passion and vigor, and can bring the revolution down at any time. You need to have a persuasive tongue. You need to be an orator. And I feel maybe the people feel like he doesn't inspire.
He's not he's not inspiring.
And the person the son who is advocating for the top office can't even address P3 kids. You can imagine how he was talking in Kololo. You're like, Allah, Uganda. Anything is possible in Uganda. You see the youth, I've been there, I know their problems through sports, I'm like, what? So this is our next president. Sally's next president, right? You can imagine mediocrity. I can't settle for mediocrity anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
this is a challenge that we all have. It's very unfortunate that many people do not want to speak about it, to talk about it. Honorable Nsereko dismissed him, I think two or 3 years ago. I don't know what his thoughts are right now, but when you look at that interview that he had with Kagwanjala, Simon Peter Kagwanjala, you hear that him dismissing the project and not taking him seriously, not knowing that now, given the parliament we have, the legislature we have right now, we haven't tested it. We don't know what kind of policies they are going to pass. Of course, we know that they are the ones who are quiet amidst the coffee deal that is happening. They should be questioning a lot. I don't think they are doing that. We are challenged to think about how we are going to change our country. Some people are the last 2 weeks were talking about having a negotiation with the people in power, the people who actually have the real power. I wonder what you guys think about having those talks, the roundtable talks, and who is going to set the agenda and how that agenda should look like. Time is running away, but there's a lot to discuss.
I don't think
much
you
will
can
come out of it.
negotiate.
Go ahead, Manuel.
Which negotiations are you saying?
Well, they're thinking about negotiating power, thinking about negotiating a transition.
You can't negotiate power when you have no power. You cannot negotiate power from you need to bring something to the table. I cannot
When you have
come
no
to
leverage.
You have no leverage.
You're
You have to have
negotiating. You're negotiating power, yet the transition is taking place in the military.
Like
They
you
blocked
have
the
nothing.
impact now. It's already owned by
These
somebody
things that-
who is my army. How are you going to negotiate with a person like that?
These things that Mao keeps on talking about, let's sit on the round table, but you don't even have a following. You see, someone who can negotiate power is someone who is a one. What's this guy who Uhuru is supporting now? for
Ruto.
president?
All right.
No, not O'Reilly. You can't negotiate power when you are one O'Reilly because you have a whole, region that is at your
Behind
beck
you.
and call. That when you want to, you can call them and form like a small army and disorganize the whole of Kenya. That is when you can call yourself an opposition leader that can actually what?
Negotiate power.
You get, and I have conversations with people, and we keep on saying that perhaps it's time in our organizing to rethink, and the Kenyan way is the Kenyans have accepted their tribalism, you get, and they have weaponized it in a sense to use it to, in a way, protect themselves and keep their governments in check. Yes, some people will say that it's a family dynasty, just a couple of families changing hands, but at least they're exchanging hands. It's not in one family. It can go to this region, it can go to the other region, and we can see that there is, every year at least, they expect they have hope of changing their leadership. One family checks the other. So maybe even in Uganda, we should say, okay, Mau, help us and consolidate the north.
The north.
So that when you come to the negotiation table, you have come as what?
Mao won't do that.
North.
Marion, Mao won't do that. Mao is busy hitting noob. He declared the jihad on noob. He won't do that. Mao is busy with the noob.
When we come to Bobby, we say, help us consolidate the south. So that when we come to the negotiation table, we know that you have an army in the what? In the south.
In the south. Yeah.
The west, basically, help us consolidate the west. So that when you come here, now as opposition, then we can come with our own parts of the country, create a block and say, okay, you man, we have all these regions. Now we are coming for you as a person. And that's what needs to happen. But it would become hard. And perhaps this is why it is hard for opposition leaders, depending on who is in the spotlight at that time, to canvass, first of all, the whole country, but also to gain support. Because by the time you infiltrate people, by the time you learn their language, by the time you sell your agenda to them, the election is done. And usually you have how many? You don't even have months to campaign. You have like weeks.
You have a month.
In 4 weeks, you should have gone around the country and finished your business. So you're a new kid on the block, like Bobby was in 2021. Perhaps you don't even know some of the names of these districts. You're hearing their names for the first time. You're seeing people for the first time. How do you expect to get your message across with a country that has over 50 languages? You
70.
get 70. Now you see 70 languages. How are you going to get your message across? Even if I say you're going to translate in 70 languages. So it becomes
it's complicated.
hard.
It is.
It becomes hard. That's why the Kenyan way works, You get your Raila, you get your Uhuru, you get your Ruto, then you start battling. Now that's when you call a real negotiation. This person has roots in this region.
So in other words, we must embrace our identities and weaponize them to get to the negotiating table.
Probably that is probably. I mean, it has worked for the Kenyans.
Probably yes. If some are not fighting, probably yes. If some are not engaged into fighting small wars,
the ones who are
not engaged in fighting small wars, it will work. But if he declares a whole jihad on Noob, it won't work. Leave the big man.
You cannot fight in your own house and expect that house to
and that's very true.
Stand.
You'll be the dismal in your own house instead of going for the main person.
Cannot be fighting Noob. DP fights Noob. The people you're fighting actually the people, because the people are the ones that give Noob its legitimacy.
That's true.
So if the people have chosen it, you just say, oh well, I don't like the people's choice, but Munange, that is what they have chosen. You should interrogate why they have chosen it that way.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Well, folks, it's been a pleasure having this conversation, and I think we need to continue speaking and pushing for real change. I don't know how you're going to do that, but it seems that's all we have to do besides praying. Let's chat a little bit after the conversation. This is the state of the nation. Ibifa Rwanda. We are deliberate, we are reasonable, we are uncensored. The state of the nation with Henry Salu.